Harry Biles was with the Royal Naval Division when he was sent to Gallipoli in 1915. He was Assistant Paymaster of the 2nd Naval Brigade's headquarters staff. I'm Peter Biles, and Harry was my grandfather. And as the centenary of World War I is marked, I've been keen to learn more about Harry's role in the Gallipoli campaign. First of all, by reading his war diary from 1915, and also the letters that he wrote to his family back home. Harry was born in Portsmouth in 1879. His father had been a diver in the Navy, and Harry enlisted as a boy writer in 1894 when he was 15. This photograph was taken in Malta, probably around 1897, when young Harry was most likely on his first assignment to the Mediterranean. After the outbreak of war in 1914, the Royal Naval Division was dispatched briefly to Antwerp, and then in the early months of 1915 they underwent training at Blandford Camp in Dorset, but there wasn't much time to get ready to send an expeditionary force to the Dardanelles to try to knock Turkey out of the war. Harry left for Gallipoli on February the 28th and began writing a diary. Left Blandford at 12 midnight, he wrote, cycled to Shillingston. So his journey to war began on a bike. Next he caught a train to Avonmouth docks and boarded the Grantelli Castle, one of the ships that would carry the forces to the Mediterranean. In the weeks leading up to the Gallipoli landings, Harry and the 2nd Naval Brigade crisscrossed the eastern Mediterranean, from Lemnos to Port Said, to the island of Skyros, and finally to the Gallipoli Peninsula. 2 days before the first landings, Harry attended the funeral of the poet Rupert Brooke, who was in the Hood Battalion. Brooke had succumbed to an infection from a mosquito bite and died of septicemia. From Harry's diary. Body buried in the olive grove at Skyros at 11 p.m. A very impressive scene. As an assistant paymaster, Harry Biles was not in the first wave of men who went ashore at Gallipoli. On April the 26th he was still on board the Royal George, in his words, floating lazily about in the Gulf of Zyros. While waiting to land, Harry wrote a letter to his wife Queenie and his 2 children, Phyllis and Harold, at home in Portsmouth. Bombardment takes place all day long, and I don't believe any place in the world has ever been bombarded so. The ships here are simply pouring shot into them, and their guns must be red hot. My job on shore is commander of the Brigade Reserve Ammunition Column. So, my love, I don't stand quite so much chance of getting knocked over as the poor beggars in the firing line. I am taking every precaution, chum, and my thoughts are always of you and the kiddies. And the letter continues. If you could only see me now, sweetheart, covered with belts, bags, revolvers, cartridges, etc. We have to carry our food on us as well. 3 days, biscuits, a tin of meat, a little packet of tea, and a packet of sugar and a piece of cheese. But there, love, I stuck it for a week at Antwerp, so it's no hardship to me, a jolly sailor boy. There is no news of our returning, and I don't suppose we shall return until Turkey gives in or until we take Constantinople. So, my dear old chum, be prepared for 3 or 4 more months' separation. Harry made his Gallipoli landing on Thursday, April the 29th, coming ashore on W Beach. Even now, 100 years later, some of the old landing craft are still there, rusting in the sand. My grandfather left his diary on board the Royal George, so we know rather less about his weeks ashore. But I think he would have spent some time at this Royal Naval Division dugout with his commanding officer, Commodore Oliver Backhouse. Early in July, Harry wrote a long letter to his brother Arthur, and it gives a graphic account of the fighting that took place in Gallipoli in June 1915. It was to be Harry's last letter. I am not particularly anxious to watch another battle. The poor beggars who were wounded between the Turks' trench and ours were calling for help all night and next day, but our people dared not venture out for them, and so they were left. Some managed to crawl to our trenches in the dark, and the other poor chaps, I'm afraid, died of exposure and loss of blood. We have not been able to get them in yet. Only yesterday I was in the firing line and with a periscope could see numbers of them. Harry went on to write, "They are shelling us now, and we are supposed to be in a place called the Rest Camp, where they generally manage to bag on the average 5 a day. I am well underground and fairly well protected, but I must not boast. Indeed, I received my 3rd narrow shave only a week ago." Finally, he wrote, "I was on the point of going to England about a week ago with the Commodore, had everything packed up, and at the last moment, owing to an attack coming off, it was cancelled. We were to take a sea trip to Alexandria for the benefit of the Commodore's health, and we should have gone from there to England." A week after writing this letter, on July the 13th, Harry Biles was shot by a Turkish sniper and died. The chaplain of the 2nd Naval Brigade wrote, "Buried poor Biles of the headquarters staff today in the RN Division Cemetery about 10 a.m. Funeral was attended by Commodore Backhouse and his staff." Later, Harry was reburied at Skew Bridge, a Commonwealth cemetery on the peninsula. He was 36 when he died. 3 years ago, I went to Gallipoli for the first time, with my 2 sons, Jonathan and David. We discovered a beautiful place, but one still haunted by the memories of that futile conflict a century ago.